Beijing's Ministry of Foreign Affairs held its regular press conference, offering a broad set of updates that spanned international cooperation, China's role in the United Nations, President Xi Jinping's climate message, and sharp warnings regarding Taiwan's political maneuvering at the UN General Assembly. The conference began with a formal announcement, followed by a series of questions from the press that allowed the ministry's spokesperson to outline China's positions on global governance, climate change, and cross-strait relations. The briefing opened with a clear emphasis on the role of the United Nations in shaping the world order. The spokesperson reminded journalists that, as the most universal, representative and authoritative intergovernmental international organization, the United Nations has played an irreplaceable and important role in maintaining peace and security and promoting economic and social development over the past 80 years. The spokesperson went on to underline that the challenges facing the UN today do not reflect its irrelevance, but rather the disregard of its core principles. The current chaos in the world is not because the United Nations has become outdated, but precisely because the purposes and principles of the UN Charter have been constantly distorted and undermined. This framing set the stage for China's insistence that international cooperation and respect for multilateralism remain essential. According to the spokesperson, recent global crises highlight that, to resolve the problems facing today's world, the role of the UN can only be strengthened, not weakened. The UN's status must be safeguarded, not replaced. This was a pointed reminder that China, as a permanent member of the Security Council, views itself as a defender of the UN's authority. The spokesperson stressed that responsibility lies first and foremost with major global powers. For the UN to play its due role, the key lies with its member states, especially major powers. They should uphold the spirit of solidarity and cooperation, put the common interests of the international community first, truly abide by the Charter, make objective and fair judgments, and play a positive role. China's representative reiterated the country's long-standing commitment. As a founding member of the UN and a permanent member of the Security Council, China fully participates in all areas of the UN's work, consciously assumes its international obligations, and firmly upholds multilateralism. In line with this, the spokesperson highlighted President Xi Jinping's Global Governance Initiative. The initiative was described as rooted in the UN Charter and aimed at strengthening cooperation frameworks. The core concept of this initiative stems directly from the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, once again reaffirming the importance of safeguarding the international system with the UN at its core. This, the spokesperson stressed, reflects a vote of confidence in the UN and multilateralism. With the UN marking its 80-year anniversary, China pledged to work with all parties to uphold its mission and adapt it to contemporary challenges. The conference then shifted focus to climate issues, prompted by a question from China Central Television about President Xi Jinping's speech at the UN Climate Change Summit. The spokesperson outlined Beijing's position. President Xi Jinping delivered a video speech at the UN Climate Change Summit, once again demonstrating China's determination and actions in actively addressing climate change. The message was clear that China intends to fulfill its climate obligations. China will continue to uphold the vision of a community with a shared future for mankind, and make its utmost efforts to achieve its nationally determined contributions. The ministry emphasized that such goals cannot be pursued in isolation. As President Xi pointed out, achieving this goal requires arduous efforts from China itself, but also a favorable and open international environment. China committed to working with international partners. China stands ready to work hand in hand with all parties to jointly advance global climate action, promote the comprehensive and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement, and contribute to the global transition toward green and low-carbon development. Attention then turned to Taiwan's presence at the UN General Assembly, with a journalist asking whether there would be any meeting involving Lin Chia-lung, a Taiwanese politician. The response from Beijing was unequivocal. China firmly opposes and strongly condemns the Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, authorities, sending Lin Chia-lung to the UN General Assembly in New York to engage in political maneuvering. The spokesperson accused Taipei of working with outside forces. they are colluding with so-called diplomatic allies of Taiwan, cozying up to certain US politicians and desperately scheming for external support. In one of the sharpest moments of the press conference, Beijing issued a direct warning. We sternly warn the DPP authorities and Taiwan independent separatist forces. Such acts are doomed to fail and will only backfire. China's position was reiterated to the small group of states still maintaining official relations with Taipei. We also advise the few remaining so-called diplomatic allies of Taiwan not to allow themselves to be repeatedly manipulated and used by separatist forces. The spokesperson stressed the One China principle. They should recognize that there is only one China. Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, and the historical trend of China's complete reunification cannot be stopped. Finally, the ministry added a broader call for de-escalation. We hope the relevant parties will respect the facts, adhere to the right direction, and work toward easing tensions and maintaining peace and stability. Before concluding, the spokesperson expressed condolences on the passing of Professor Kong Jian, offering sympathies to his family. This was followed by an assurance that China remains open to continued engagement with relevant parties on outstanding issues. The press conference closed with the customary invitation for final questions. None were raised and the session ended. This press conference reinforced several key themes that have shaped China's foreign policy messaging in recent years. Defending multilateralism and the UN, Beijing consistently frames itself as a champion of multilateral institutions, countering narratives that portray the UN as outdated. By attributing global instability to distortions of the UN Charter rather than flaws within the institution itself, China positions itself as a stabilizer in the global system. Climate change leadership, Xi Jinping's appearance at the UN Climate Summit and the ministry's follow-up were meant to underline China's role as an indispensable player in climate governance. The message balances acknowledgement of domestic challenges with a call for international cooperation. Firm stance on Taiwan. The strongest language of the briefing was reserved for Taiwan. Beijing made it clear that any attempt by Taipei to expand its international space, particularly through the UN, will be met with forceful opposition. The warnings to Taiwan's allies were equally stern, signaling China's readiness to confront countries that support Taipei diplomatically. China as responsible power. Throughout the conference, the tone was one of responsibility, whether in relation to climate change, global governance, or peace and security. The message was that China not only participates in, but actively shapes international discourse. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs briefing was less about new policy announcements and more about reaffirming established positions. By highlighting the UN's role, amplifying Xi Jinping's climate remarks, and issuing strong warnings over Taiwan, Beijing sought to underscore its dual identity as both a cooperative global actor and an uncompromising guardian of national sovereignty. In doing so, the ministry delivered a message aimed at both domestic and international audiences. China is committed to global cooperation but will not tolerate challenges to its core interests.